Hey, so I wanted to do a quick little follow-up to my previous videos and go through a little bit of authentication and permission with Zero. So there are sort of two sides to this. There's the authentication side and there's the permission side. So for the most part, the authentication is pretty simple. And is just sort of going to be there to help you with permissions. So the authentication you can handle basically however you want, put whatever information you want into some sort of JWT. There are a few options here. If you look under the authentication documentation for Zero, there's some options here for how you handle secrets, what to pass in, and you can do something custom. You can use something like next auth or clerk or whatever, cognito, whatever works best. But it's this sort of is pretty agnostic from Zero's perspective, and as long as you give it some sort of JWT that it can validate, it will use that information in the application. So that really ties into the permissions. But first, just to recap, I have a pretty simple task list application here with tasks you can create, you can modify. It shows the name of the task, who created it, who it's assigned to. You can move it between states, you can delete it. Since my last video and for this example, I added just a couple things here. I added a little section up here to show who you're signed in as, and I added another user, and then I added this page. So this is just, I'm not doing any, actual authentication. It's just you click on which user you want to sign in as, and it'll change who you're signed in as. Charlie is the third user I added, and Charlie is an admin. So that'll come into play a little later. So here in my auth TS file, I just added some basic authentication stuff. Again, I'm not really using any actual user accounts or anything. It's not even connected to the database side of things, just for the demo. But here are my three users: Alice, Bob, and Charlie. And then here, auth data, this type is showing what is in the JWT. So that's, what I'm putting in the JWT that I'm creating, and then it's what Zero will use in the permissions checks. So now back over here in my schema.ts file for Zero, I have the same tables defined, relationships between the tables, but what I've added is I've filled in this defined permissions. So one notable change since my last video is the permissions from Zero are access is denied by default. So when you're creating your permission file, your permission object here, you're going to need to set permissions on all of the types you're creating. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to, the client's not going to be able to see them or make any changes to them. So there are a few helper types that Zero gives you. There's anyone can do anything and anyone can. So those are pretty quick and easy, and those let you say anyone can do anything. You can see in here, select, insert, update, delete. It's basically no, anyone who tries to do any of those operations. If you set anyone can do anything, then anyone can do it. And then if you just want to be a little more granular, and we'll get into some of these a little more in a second, but anyone can is if you just want select, insert, update, delete. If you just want to say anyone can do that specific operation, but you want to create your own permissions for other things, you can use that as a helpful, quick shorthand. In this part of your schema file, you're creating basically ZQL queries. So it's the same type of query that you're using in the rest of your application, but these queries are what show if your client has access to a piece of data, can make changes to it, can delete it, can add new, that sort of thing. So you basically are defining multiple queries, and you can put them on each table type in here, and it can limit select. So that's, are they able to read the data? Insert, can they add new records? Update, which is split out into pre-mutation and post-mutation, and delete. So can they delete the record? So there are a lot of powerful ways you can define these things. Some things to be aware of. So just to get sort of a feel for things, it can be helpful to play around with each of these types just to see what each thing does and get sort of some intuition for it. In my example, I'm not really doing anything with creating users or anything along those lines. So I just slap the anyone can do anything helper on there. So anyone can select, read, insert, update, delete any of the user types, but that's not really important for this. So I made a few changes to the task though, just to play around with a few things. So just to give you an example of what these things do. So keep an eye on the task list. Right now I have a isAuthenticated function that I defined up here that basically says only people who are authenticated can select read data. This could also allow you to do something like, you could say only people who are created or assigned a task can view it, or something like that. Or it can be something a little more blanket like this. So you define the functions, they take in the auth data. So that's, if you remember what came in that JWT. So it's going to be sub is the subject. So that's the user ID, username. We don't need that. Are they an admin? And then issued at an expiration of the token. And then you also get this expression builder type passed in. I use a little shorthand here just so I didn't have to keep rewriting that, and it made it a little more compact here. But this just is a little helper. It's a little shorter, and it already has schema passed in. But for each of these, it's for the task, because I'm not doing it on the user. So each of these checks, there are a few types in here. There's other things to make queries. There's CMP, there's OR, and I think a few others just to make your queries. So if you look down here, so right now I have isAuthenticated. So now let's go back to our sign in and let's sign out, then go back to the tasks, and you can see nothing's showing up. All the tasks are gone. That's because this is failing and there's nothing else in there. Something to keep in mind is if anything in this list passes, so if I have a isAuthenticated and then I make another one, we can pass in so let's say isAuthenticated, and we're going to compare the subject is null. They do show up. So if you have conflicting ones, it's checking if any of these pass. So something to be aware of. And then same thing if we sign in and then comment this out, they disappear. Also notice a little flash. This is the same syncing that zero's doing. So if a change is made, before that's pushed down, the data is still on the client's device in memory or stored in IndexedDB. And it's not until that permission check runs and things update that it'll disappear. So it's another thing with local first software to be aware of. So we can look at a few other of these permission functions that I predefined. Is admin, is authenticated, is creator, and is assignee. So I predefined those and reused them in a few places. So is admin is checking compare the literal from the auth data admin to true. Is authenticated, compare literal subject, not null. And is creator. So this is the difference between the CMP lit and CMP. CMP, you're checking, these are the fields in the database, in that table, in the task table. So, that's, you can't pass in the subject from the auth data or another literal there. That's where you would need compare literal. And then it gives you the comparison operator and what you're comparing it against. So this expression builder has a few helpful things we can pull out. So you can see here, comparison literal. So comparison is those using a table, a name, column name from the table, comparing that to something. Compare literal. So that could be like we're doing with the auth data, making sure one of those checks passes, and or not, or, as you're familiar with from a database, you can combine things together, and then exists helps you create a check with relationships between values in the database. Back to our permissions for the table. Insert, you can only insert if you are listed as the creator on the task, or if you're listed as the admin, or if you're an admin in your auth data. So either of those will pass. Let's come back to, let's see, for mutation, let's start with the post mutation. If you are an admin, a creator, or an assignee. So this is split out to pre-mutation and post-mutation. Pre-mutation is a check that runs on the record before the mutation is run, and then post-mutation checks after. If this fails, it won't run. If this fails, it won't be committed to the database. So it will perform whatever update you are running and then run this check. And it sort of gives you some options to make some changes around, it's okay to have some of these, wide open permissions on pre-mutation or post-mutation and check on the other side, as long as you're aware of the effects of that. So for example, anyone, authenticated or not, if you have permission or not, you can make a change. But we're locking it down to as long as after, on the record, you are an admin, or you're the creator of the record, or you're an assignee. So if I'm not an admin, if I'm not a creator, if I'm not the task isn't assigned to me, then I can make a change if I'm assigning it to myself, or if I'm setting myself as the creator. We could also apply the same things on the pre-mutation as post-mutation, but we don't need to. Vice versa, if you think about if we had just put this on pre-mutation, that could be another way to lock it down, but it would mean you could take yourself off as, if you're an admin, you could do whatever. But if you're set as the one who created the task, or you're the person who is assigned the task, but then you're setting someone else as the assignee, or setting someone else as the creator, or both, if these don't apply after as well, it will still run. And you just have to think about if that's what you're trying to do. Something else to be aware of in this case, you could be not originally not the creator of the task or assignee of the task, and you're assigning it to yourself, and it could run. Is that, something to think about if that's what you want. One thing to be aware of with this split between pre and post mutation is you're not going to be able to compare the value before and after, at least currently. So if you want to be able to do some sort of check and say, make sure they're the assignee before and the assignee after, or that doesn't change, or make sure the person set as the creator before is also set as the creator after. That's not something you're going to be able to check because these will run separately at different times, and there's no way to pass that information back and forth. That may be something that they add in the future. I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker. It's just something to be aware of and make sure you're planning around that as you're defining your permissions. And then lastly, delete. Only admins can delete in this example. So to see what that looks like, let's take a look at how each of these works with different users. So we already saw that if you're not signed in, nothing's going to show up here. Now we can look at insert. Insert, we can add new tasks. Create, and there it showed up. I'm the creator and I'm the assignee, Alice. We can move that around. We can't delete it. So I tried to delete it. You see it sort of blips out for a second, but then comes back. That's because Alice is not an admin. We can look at something like buy movie tickets. So under update, anyone can make that change, but only an admin, the person who created the task or the person assigned the task as long as that's the case after the mutation, be able to make that change. So that's why that works for test. It'll also work. Alice is the assignee for buy movie tickets, so that can change. Alice is the creator on each of these, so we can do those. But walk the dog, same thing, little blip, but it doesn't get committed because Alice isn't an admin, the creator, or the assignee. But if we go back to our sign in page and sign in as Bob, who is also not an admin, he won't be able to make changes to this. He can read it, but he can make changes to this one as well. And same with this one, where he's the creator but not the assignee. And then lastly, if we sign in as Charlie, who is an admin, he can make changes. He can delete, and he can do any of these things in here because he has that is admin permission, which applies to all of these. And then by definition, he's also authenticated and anyone can. So we can also see if we turn this off and moved is creator or is assignee, nothing shows up even though Charlie's an admin. Alice can see all of the Alice tasks, but not that one Bob only task. And Bob can see all the Bob tasks. We could take off creator and just want to see the tasks assigned to you. Here's what that would look like. Alice has these. So yeah, that's about it. Give it a try, play around with it. Don't be afraid to toggle things on and off, create more permission types, see what does what. You can also look at some of the examples they have listed here Hello Zero is their template example, and then ZBugs is their larger, task, bug reporting application that a lot more features, and you could probably see some good examples in there. They also have a section here on debugging permissions. You could see they have some information on debugging read permissions with this npx transform query command, and then write permissions. This one I found helpful. If you look in the logs, you can see this permission check failed, and it'll give you some info on what failed, row policies, cell policies, that sort of thing. So just as a quick example, we're signed in as Alice, and if we try to make a change like move this Bob task, we can then look in the logs and permission failed, update. Here is the task that was being updated. When did it fail? Post mutation. What was the auth data that was passed in? And then what row policies here are the result of this command here. So it's showing so here's allow is admin, allow if created by, and allow if assigned to. So we can see none of those apply. That's why that failed. So that could be helpful to look through to get an understanding of why something did or didn't work. And then one more thing to keep an eye out for, in their roadmap for Q2 of 2025, cell level read permissions are coming up. So something that by the time you're watching this may be out, and something you'll be able to use to have a little more granular control of reading in your permission configuration. So yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any other questions about using permissions, specific examples, or anything like that. Or if there's anything else about Zero that you want to see videos about. Thanks for watching.